Hey everybody, we are here to talk about a recent big hit for Disney Plus, their first real major original program, the one that kind of got everyone hooked, and that would be The Mandalorian. And I swear it wasn't necessarily the plan that this would basically become a Star Wars channel for like a couple of weeks, but hey, what are you gonna do? So yeah, this is Malik and I discussing The Mandalorian. Each of us having only seen it the once. Uh, you also watched it weekly, like right? You didn't like binge through it, if I remember correctly.
Yes and no. I was keeping up with it for like the first half, and then I was getting into a bunch of other stuff. So I watched episodes weekly, binging the rest of it.
Okay, that makes sense. And that's kind of interesting because we might get into this later, but episode 4 or 5 around is where I want to say there was a little bit of a dip in people's enthusiasm for the show. And then, like, the first 3 episodes and the last 3 episodes, I feel like, are where a lot of the praise and enthusiasm lies. And I have my own feelings about 4 and 5, but those were kind of the ones that got a little bit more of a lukewarm reception just based on my time sort of like with people on social media talking about it, videos, reviewing individual episodes and whatnot.
My memory is gonna need to be because I don't even remember offhand specifically what is in those episodes particular that people didn't like.
Well, 4 and 5 are the episode where he visits the village, and then the episode where he goes with the other bounty hunter who's like a newbie, and Baby Yoda gets babysat by Princess Carolyn.
Okay. Episode 4, the one where he goes to that village. I think that's a perfectly fine episode. It is kind of really tropey story that I've seen like a dozen times. But I didn't mind it, and it introduced us to Toronto's character and becomes a major player towards the back half.
Yeah, episode 4 personally I enjoyed a lot. Like you said, it's really tropey. It's, this show aping westerns that aped samurai movies. But that's kind of tradition for Star Wars at this point. But yeah, in general, I really enjoyed this show. I think it's a hoot. And the fact that we're able to talk about it like episode by episode brings us to what I suppose is the big sort of like, I don't know. Well, do you want to sort of like offer any thoughts on just the story of the show in general? Any specific highlights for you? And then I could maybe do that, and then we'll kind of talk about what I think is the interesting thing, which is just this show's approach to its story and the fact that it's such an episodic series when people were maybe not expecting that.
Well, I mean, I've gotten used to more serialized narratives. I necessarily prefer that, since I haven't really been engaging in a lot of episodic. Really, I can't think of anything prior to that I was watching on a consistent basis. It was episodic, really. With the exception of maybe Blacklist. I don't know if you've ever seen that show. But that show is a little weird hybrid of both. It has a lot of episodic stuff, but even then, with its episodic episodes, like lipids that are leading into ongoing storylines, this show is not a hybrid of serialized and episodic. Although I do agree with you, it is more episodic than it is necessarily. Each episode does its own little self-contained thing. Kind of, there are certain episodes that like lead directly into others, but for the most part, I do feel like it itself more to being experienced in the week-to-week format, which I was enjoying. In time, it was kind of experiences, going week to week for the first half and then just binging the second. And blown away by the soundtrack, production value. The composer is Black Panther, amazing. And I love that this doesn't really sound like any other kind of composition. It feels squarely. Usually, every other Wars thing just tries to stop Williams, and it's very refreshing that the score is not that, but very, very distinct. Like I said, the production value, Jon Favreau, and the team he's put together is just looks like it's insane. I think the storytelling is solid, and this is interesting. Who plays Mando? He's not even in the suit all the time, but you feel the character even just his voice. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's sort of another. There's a lot that you mentioned there that I want to touch on, but that specifically is sort of another thing that was sort of a consistent reservation from the people who were a little bit less enthusiastic about the show. That being the fact that the protagonist is in a mask the whole time, basically. By the end of it all, we've got one scene with Pedro Pascal visibly on screen, and some people felt like having their protagonist stuck in a mask the whole time made it difficult to get emotionally attached, or like they would just have difficulty being emotionally invested in certain scenes because you can't read any expression. And I didn't have that. I kind of had the opposite thing where, yeah, I understand the people who are like, you shouldn't make it a common practice to do like live action television where you can't see your main actor's face because then it might run the risk of feeling like you're doing a show about action figures and not a person. But I actually like the fact that his face isn't visible for story reasons, because I feel like that creates an interesting thing where both the audience and every other character in the fiction are projecting onto him, and each individual audience member is going to be inferring things from Pedro Pascal's delivery and his body language that maybe is the intent, maybe is not, and it's going to be a little different from how everyone else interprets it. And I kind of really like having a main character in a show who's like that.
I like that too. I think it's really ballsy, it's really bold. And also, I think it's strengthened, well, in a way, it kind of strengthens his relationship with Baby Yoda, because he can't see his eyes. But even though it's just a child, he has this person to this character who protects him and talks to him, like, you know, obviously understand what he's saying. Kids, like little infants, they bond to certain people, and even though you can't see his face, I think there's something almost spiritual about that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not.
And I mentioned this briefly in the Rise of Skywalker discussion, I believe is what it was. It might have been off camera, where you get the sense that having an adorable little creature like Baby Yoda was in part done because it's easy for audiences to empathize with that. And so it's sort of like a safety net. So if someone's like, oh, the Mando's in a mask the whole time, I can't really care about him, you can at least connect with him on the level that you care about this adorable thing that he also cares about.
Yeah. And I had, to be honest, like even seeing trailers for, he's super excited about it. And then watching it and getting that whole that that he's supposed to take back. And you clarified this for me, because immediately when we revealed Baby Yoda, I thought we're just doing porgs again, and this was some sort of mandate by Disney, so the stupid plush toy because of the easy Q factor thing. And obviously, Baby Yoda is put into the script, but I do think it's less about selling toys. I mean, that is a happy byproduct, but it is more about getting you guys with man, who is a bounty hunter, but also a man with morals and code, and really, really strong values, which is why I was able to come around on that, because, like I said, initially we're just doing it plush toys, and it immediately, like, just seeing the episode Baby Yoda, and it immediately felt like super counterintuitive to me that you would make a just him having to care for a child. Like, that felt really counterintuitive to me at first, but then seeing how totally won me over.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that sort of counterintuitive feeling element to it, because I think that's another sort of indication of it being a story decision and not a marketing decision, because they kept Baby Yoda like under lock and key, like that thing was a secret. If the idea was to like sell toys, they would put it in trailers, right? And not even just selling toys, because like you mentioned, it's sort of weird to think doing a bounty hunter show with this cute, adorable thing in it. If they put Baby Yoda in trailers, then that would probably get even more people onto the service to watch the show, just because Baby Yoda appeals to a demographic outside of the people you would naturally expect to be excited for like a Mandalorian show. Like you said, people who want like a cool, badass bounty hunter type thing is sort of a separate demographic from all of the people who are like, oh god, this adorable little creature. And rather than market the show to all demographics so that they could get more people onto the service, they decided to keep it a secret, and that sort of helps lend an impact to the end of that first episode. That helps, so it's like, oh man, this maybe isn't the show that I thought it was going to be, and that creates this neat sort of like curiosity going from episode to episode. I wasn't even certain at the end of the first episode, or even necessarily the second, that Baby Yoda, like, caring for him would be the whole show. I was kind of going back and forth until the end of the third episode, where I was like, is this going to be kind of a thing where, like, every episode or every couple of episodes is a different thing, and, like, Baby Yoda is the focus of episodes 1, 2, and 3, and then we move on? But no, it's the whole show, and it's kind of genius.
And we're getting a second season. The season is coming out now this year. It's now 2020. Since
fall of this year.
Yeah, since Baby Yoda doesn't naturally age like a human being, and even at like in 50 years, they can get away with just keeping him that way for the entire show's run. Like, they could easily do like where along the show goes, seasons where he still is just a kid. I wonder if that'll wear thin for people.
The same also applies to the Mando himself, though, and that's another way you could maybe look at the show and Disney Plus in general from a kind of cynical angle, of like the benefit to making a show that's quote unquote about action figures, in that you got Pedro Pascal's voice, but beyond that you don't really need an actor on set all the time. You've got a rando in a suit and you've got a puppet, and those two carry your show. They could do this for like you're suggesting, for like as long as they want without having to worry about sort of trials and tribulations that come with having actual actors and stuff. And of course, they've got actual actors in supporting roles and villain roles and stuff, but it's really interesting and potentially kind of, I don't know, we'll see where it goes if this sets a precedent for anything else, like within Disney Plus or outside of it, of like, you've proven you can basically carry a narrative with two characters who aren't real people, quote unquote.
Yeah. I would like to talk about, we're like punch, and we're not exactly going into anything. I think we usually never do, but I would like to talk about the finale, and particularly because he is, of course, the director of Thor Ragnarok. He directed the finale, and I didn't see JoJo, but you did. He also, so, I think he did a masterful job with that finale. The open troops, that was hilarious, and I could have watched that go on for like another 5 minutes. That was great.
Yes. First of all, thank you for reminding me.
Beats in that episode. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, on top of that, the emotional beats of that episode are really strong. All around, that was a finale.
Agreed. But thank you for reminding me about Jojo Rabbit, because I forgot to put that on my end of year list of things to talk about, and I'm doing that now. And also, anyone listening, go watch Jojo Rabbit. It's great, and it deserves your money. But anyway, yes, that episode's great. I know some people who, again, like, mostly, like, I want to say most of what I've heard about this show is like 90% unanimous praise, even from people who don't necessarily think it's the best thing ever. Opinions are, I think, around the board generally positive. But, some people I've heard be like, I don't necessarily like that opening scene. I don't like that it makes, like, stormtroopers have terrible aim, like some kind of inherent thing within the fiction. But I'm like, I love that joke. That's great. And that whole, it's great, and it's sort of the thing that I think Taika does best when he's, like, in top form, which is it uses the humor to, like, world build and lend some humanity to the conflict and the universe, where it's like, these are just two random guys. And sort of the best moments with stormtroopers is like moments where they're just kind of off to the side, and you can just tell that they're two guys just going about their day. Like, that's great. Like, the best moments with the stormtroopers in the movies are those, and I like that it carried over into that scene where it's like, these are just two guys on their lunch break, essentially.
And I could literally imagine all who watch the show, and they see one of the stormtroopers just punch Baby Yoda, like, oh yeah, he's dead.
Oh yes, I forget the mom. That was me. I was like, you have just signed your death warrant. Like, that was not a soft punch.
No, once.
Yeah. But yeah, and you mentioned the score, and I had a thing to say about the score, which is that I agree that it doesn't really sound like anything else in Star Wars, except for maybe Solo. I think Solo kind of has a unique-ish sound to it that I think is kind of in line with this show. But what I like about it is that it doesn't feel out of place in the Star Wars universe at all, and I think that applies for the whole show, where this definitely feels unique amongst the Star Wars content that I've seen, but it also feels totally in line with that universe, and it makes me more interested in the sort of wider fringes of stuff that goes on outside of the movies. And I'm like, yeah, like if there's anything that I've grown to appreciate with Star Wars in like the past couple of years, and especially with stuff like this, it's just how cool of a setting it is. And like shows like this, I feel like really take advantage of the setting.
Yeah, they did. Like, Clone Wars is still my favorite Star Wars thing. And one a lot, as well as Force Awakens, but this is definitely up there as well.
Yeah, and there's something. Well, I mean, just on the note of Taika Waititi and the finale, like the character that he plays, the IG unit, it's this show I think is really good at having sort of a supporting cast that's present. They each pop up in sort of their own episode. They'll disappear for a while, and they'll come back for the last two. And that, I think, is a really smart approach, because it's funny because you caught me in the middle of editing a Doctor Who video, and this show and the sort of episodic approach that it takes is kind of similar to Doctor Who in execution. My preferred approach to that kind of semi-serialized storytelling, where it's, if threads are going to like tie together and stuff, I prefer it be in the finale as opposed to all over the show. So like you said, you can sort of jump into a given episode in the middle of the season if you want, and just enjoy in each story. But if you're going to tune in for the finale, that is the payoff to all that's come before. And that's where it would be an appropriate time to bring in, okay, X character from here, or this plot device from this moment. I was surprised that no one from the Prison Break episode factored into the last two at all, but I really enjoyed that episode also.
They were left there, though.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm fully expecting that at some point, like next season or eventually down the line, they're just going to have gotten out somehow.
Okay, yeah. They break out and they have a grudge with Mando for leaving.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, that might be my second, maybe third favorite episode. I think there was a lot of great tension in that episode. There was some action.
Yeah, that one is a high up for me. I want to say my favorites are probably 2, 4, and 6. Like, I love all the stuff into the Jawas, and like, I've got sort of 2 points. One that like directly connects, and one that I want to bring up eventually. But someone in the discussion of episode 2 pointed out how it's great that this being a show and kind of self-contained as it is, it doesn't have to be another Fate of the Galaxy thing, especially being post the original trilogy timeline-wise. It doesn't have to be, the evil empire, they've got something big cooking and the Mandalorian is going to factor into that somehow. No, we can just have an episode that's literally about him hunting for breakfast for the Jawas as like part of a bargain that they have. And that's great, and there's genuine tension there, but it's also just this funny little thing.
You're thinking, what exactly? It has to be something special that they need this egg for. And then they just rip it apart and start gobbling it, and eating it raw, and then man size and walks away.
That's great. And like the other thing is to do with episode 5, which is someone pointed this out, and I hadn't even really thought about it, but it's true, which is that it's almost sort of bizarre seeing something that is taking a lot of its cues clearly from the original trilogy of movies. Like, the reason that we have a Mandalorian show is because everyone is enamored with like the aesthetic of Boba Fett, and then in episode 5 he shows up at this place that's got the pit droids around, and the pit droids are pretty exclusively like a prequel trilogy thing. And it's really interesting that this show does not necessarily shy away from the aesthetics of the prequels. And that's kind of like, that was a thing in Clone Wars, but here it's interesting to have a live action property again for the first time since those movies kind of embrace kind of the things that were prequel exclusive for a long time.
Yeah, that's I think that's interesting. And that's also really cool because it just treats that as simply canonical because it is. Like it's what JJ failed to do. I don't like what came before, so I'm just going to like not acknowledge that or immediately retcon. This show is not doing. I don't like prequels. I don't like prequels. I love Clone Wars, but regardless of whether you like all that stuff or not, and it would be, for lack of a better word, disingenuous or inauthentic to just pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah, like it's got that vibe of like you mentioned Rise of Skywalker being kind of a cowardly movie. The mindset of like because something happened in Star Wars or like a movie came out that was controversial, now everything associated with that movie / movies is now tainted, and like you want to avoid even reminding people about the controversial thing so that they'll like your product more. But I like the mindset behind this, which is that no, we can take things from even the most controversial of the movies or the most disliked and put them in something good and make them perfectly fine. And even Last Jedi had that to an extent, where that movie was the first of the and like ended up being the only of the 3 sequels that was like, you know what, here's a thing about the prequels, let's take it and sort of factor it into the story. And like that, I feel like is the mindset you should have, of like whether or not it's necessarily just something is canon, you just want it to be like, recognize where good or even neutral ideas or things exist in a movie that's not that great, and feel free to take it and do your own thing with it. Don't be scared of it.
Yeah, and this show is not really like. I never would have thought we would have gone as far as to have a stormtrooper just punch Baby Yoda in the face.
Yeah, there's a lot of moments across the show where I'm like, people are kind of worried about it being on Disney Plus and like having the Disney brand so front and center, is like their programming is not going to take too many risks or risk like alienating sort of like the general family audience. There's kind of a lot of moments of not like gore or anything, like that's not Star Wars, but there's stuff that will give some of the movies a run for their money or even surpass them in terms of just like brutality of what happens to some people.
And that I wasn't necessarily surprised by, because it's live action. So I am glad it is as rough and tumble as it is.
Yeah, and it's also not afraid to have the character not be like so clean cut. Even though he's like playing Papa Wolf to this child, he'll still do things like if a job goes wrong and somebody betrays him, he'll just leave them with this tracking thing that gets them blown up and shot at by X-Wings. It's like, it's got that same kind of vibe as like Malcolm Reynolds on Firefly. But like, yeah, he's a good guy, and the audience always roots for him, but he's not afraid to get his hands dirty at all.
Jeremy Jones compared this to Firefly, yeah. Good comparison.
Yeah, it's got that kind of vibe to it. I want to say, like, even just the look of his ship kind of gives me Serenity vibes. Like, I kind of get that vibe from the Razor Crest. And yeah, it being a spacefaring show. And again, the thing about, like what we mentioned earlier, like not being so related to Imperial or the main conflict of like what we think of as Star Wars stuff. It's got the Firefly vibe in that it's about the worlds that are kind of like on the fringes, and Firefly is very decidedly a show where all of the quote-unquote main conflict, like the central sort of planets that really run things and are the real bad guys, are all just off-screen, and we get that here too. Like, until the finale where we have a Moth show up, and that's like, oh, he's a big deal, and especially with the last scene of the show. Until that moment, it's really, this whole show is just the dregs dealing with the dregs, really.
Yeah, and I like that there are no like super major bigwigs yet. Is a bit of a concern with future seasons. Like I hope they don't feel they need to dip their toe into the super familiar stuff. Something we didn't even bring up is when this show is set.
I believe the only indication that we have is that it's set sometime after Return of the Jedi, because they're always like, he's ex-Imperial, or he used to be part of the Empire. So, like, clearly the Empire is no more, but also we are clearly a long ways off from, like, the world that the sequels are set in.
Okay, yeah, so they're on Emperor. And so there really is no, like, major war or anything going on right now. They couldn't even, since those characters, are still alive when we get to the sequel, they bring in Luke. Like he'd have to be younger than he is when we meet him in, obviously, but I guess they could bring in a Luke or Han, but I hope they.
Yeah, I'm in the camp that really would prefer that they don't. And I know a couple of people who are like, the whole appeal of the show to them is that it gets them to explore the Star Wars world without having to tie into like Sith and Jedi and Rebels and Imperial and stuff. And like again, it's neat that we have all that stuff just off the fringes. But I don't know, like because I want to say there was a press release of some kind like a couple of days ago that implies that they would be leaning into that stuff more, and like we would be seeing some familiar characters in season 2. And I'm apprehensive, but it depends on how they handle it. Like I'm okay with like a character who we know from the movies but isn't like a main guy showing up in a couple of episodes, or having some indication of Jedi or Sith stuff, because we end this season with Giancarlo Esposito as I forget what his actual name is, but we know he's a Moth, and he has a dark saber, which is a whole thing in the lore, and we end with the indication of like, oh man, this Baby Yoda's a Force user. The Force users are like religious enemies of the Mandalores, and we're definitely building to some kind of further Jedi presence in season 2. But I kind of hope that for the most part we stick with what season 1 was, which is looking at what the rest of the galaxy is up to while the Sith and the Jedi and the Empire and the Rebels do their stuff.
Or at the very least, we bring in new characters and don't feel the need to bring back before.
Yeah, like at this point, I trust this show, and I really like this show being as good as it is has made me trust like what Disney Plus is doing, and like I'm going into the rest of their original stuff. Excited! I can't wait for the original Marvel shows now. I'm even more excited for those than I was. But always like a pinch of salt, a bit of apprehension when they say like we're gonna tie these in a bit more closely to the movies. Like, I don't know, the fact that it was so separate was its appeal, but we'll see what happens.
Do you have anything further you want to add for this one?
Thinking on it, not too sure. There is that cliffhanger or that sort of indication at the end of episode 5, and that might have been the moth that we eventually end up seeing, or it might not have been. How do you feel about people who sort of like theorize and maybe feel like it would be neat to have actual Boba Fett show up on the show? Like, that's something I could see where it's like it's a character from the movies and he's recognizable and it would maybe be cool, but I don't really need it.
I don't need that either. Yeah, I don't need that.
Yeah. But that aside, I think, yeah, we've really covered sort of like the broad appeal of this show. There's not too much more that I have to add about it, so yeah, I think that's all good.
All right, well, that'll do it for us.